Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today about invoice processing with our partners Epehsoft and connexas. I'm excited to turn it over to Volker, who is going to begin our presentation today.
Thank you, Melissa, for introduction. So from my side, hello and welcome everybody to our invoice processing webinar. We will show you today in a bigger group of people how you can manage your invoices from the first beginning, from scanning up till the end in Alfresco and SAP. As you can see, we have here two partners, and I think just a few words right from the beginning about Epehsoft and connexas. We will talk about this later, but it's interesting that these two partners were the first partners having a certified product against Alfresco. And so it's perfect that we do this together now, and hopefully we have a nice solution for you. So we introduced a little bit to Alfresco. I think the most of the attendees might know, but here just a few figures that you can imagine what is Alfresco about. And as this is our core component in the background of our solution, so we want to bring this a little bit closer to you also. The subscription model, you see that we have 95% of recurring subscriptions, meaning that we have satisfied customers around the world with many active users, with more than 1,300 active users currently, high volume of documents, and also Alfresco is rising fast when you have a look at the employees. So it's really running a very well business, and we as a partner are also interested in having a very strong partner like Alfresco growing the business worldwide. Just a few of the customers. Want to mention that, of course, the customers, as you've seen before, are growing worldwide, so we are everywhere, and especially in the SAP environment, where our part is coming from to integrate SAP with Alfresco. We have here, I found also many of our own customers with SAP, like you see here Mannheimer Versicherung, UK Power Networks, or Sagoba. So the SAP seems to be a very strong player in this market, as Alfresco is going for the big enterprises worldwide. And many of them simply do have SAP. So the background or the intention is definitely to bring these two systems together, the strengths of the content management and the structured information from SAP. And of course, bring also some additional software pieces around there, like the capturing part, meaning you have to first make your documents in an electronic way, so scan, extract the information from the documents with Epehsoft. So this is our starting point of our invoice processing, and after we have done this, we will move forward and store the document to Alfresco, manage the document in Alfresco, and therefore bring these information that we collected with Epehsoft, Alfresco, and forward this information then to SAP. And there comes into account the connection between Alfresco and SAP. That's our product connexas. If we have then the information and the document available, then we process in this invoice solution we want to show you today, mainly in SAP, because simply we have in SAP a lot of the invoice process data available. Think about you have an invoice that is connected to a purchase order, and you recognize the purchase order number from the invoice right at the beginning with Epehsoft, and we route this information back to SAP. You can imagine how easy it is to automate the whole process, because on the SAP side we have a lot of information available about the invoice and can judge if this invoice is correct or if there are any problems. So here in this overview, you see our key components, and we want to introduce today these components and the whole process to you, that you see it right from the beginning up to the end, that the document or the invoice can be posted, and finally paid. And the short overview of the content for this webinar, so that you know what you will see in the next minutes or nearly an hour. You see that Episoft will start now with the process as indicated before. You get a short introduction to capturing, and then we want to demo the tool so you see how the behavior is, what you can recognize, how the process can start. Then, after I hand over to Dave, he will give back to me the presentation, and we continue and show you the key components shortly, what we are using there, like the connexas, the integration to SAP and SAPCO, the process of handling such invoices also in SAP and mobile clients. And finally, you will definitely get also a demo about this process, and we'll see if you have some question and answers in between there. So this was my short introduction, just to bring you up to speed to see what we will show in our webinar today. And now I would ask Dave to continue, and maybe Melissa, you can change the roles to Dave so he can continue with the Episoft part.
Thank you, Volker. This is David Tellerico. I'm with Epehsoft, and I'll be presenting the overview of Epehsoft and a quick demo on that. Okay, fantastic. So real quick, I'm going to give a quick, probably 5-8 minute overview of Epehsoft, what it does, and then we'll go into the product and show you a quick demo and show you how it interfaces to connexas and works as a great front end for Alfresco. So we are a platform to do capture, document capture, and we now have a version on Linux, so we can run on either Linux servers or Windows servers. And then as far as your clients, being a thin client solution, any web browser will work on that. So real quick, who is Epehsoft? We're all executives that came within the document capture space, and we have over 80 years combined experience in the executive team. Relatively new company, about 4 years old, but we saw an opportunity to really do what Alfresco does, of look at this legacy capture process and find a better approach to doing it. And I'll be covering what those are. You know, better technology, more advanced features, and just a better way to do it. And we're usually trying to be about 3 years ahead of the competition in terms of technology, and that's what we're going to maintain doing. And that's really what Epehsoft is. So what exactly does the product do? We take input of documents. These can be email attachments, PDF files, TIFF images, faxes, or scanned documents. A lot of times people say, I don't do any scanning, but that's okay. Most people are getting documents as PDFs or other types of formats. The concept is these documents come into your organization and you need to do something with them. And until you know what they are or know what the information is on them, you can't do anything with it. But if you have documents, those come into the system. Once they come in, we analyze them. We determine what types of documents they are. In addition to that, what type of metadata you may want off those documents. When we're done with that process, we deliver that information that we gathered to a workflow, business process, connexas, or Alfresco. We do not store documents. We are not a repository at all. We're just providing the value extracted from those documents and then passing them on. End result of this entire process to create value, whether it be reducing labor, increasing the speed of process, reducing errors, etc. And that's what Epehsoft does. Many times the capture process alone can justify the entire ECM solution. So how does the customer benefit in this type of solution? Documents can come in quicker, go into your workflow quicker, become part of the business process much quicker. There's less manual labor. You may find if you have a highly labor-intensive process of invoice entry, you could reduce the staff in half fairly easily on that. In addition to that, because you're using automation, there's less human errors in this process. And because it is now a completely automated process from the time the document hits our system to the time we release it, it's completely audible now. So you can find documents, you can increase the process and reduce the errors. So high level, let's look at the solution before I get into the demo. So as I mentioned, documents come in. in various formats, scan, fax, email, or pulling from a file share. Once they come in, they go to the Epehsoft server. Epehsoft server, being a thin client solution, can reside in the cloud or can reside on-premise behind a firewall. The Epehsoft server processes the information and then determines what they are. They can be invoices, like we mentioned, that we're talking about here today, but because it's a universal platform and it just looks at documents, these can be contracts, they can be purchase orders, they can be any type of document that has data that you need to identify, get extracted data off of, and pass on to a workflow. So it's very universal in terms of the types of documents. Once we identify the type of document, we then look for metadata that you define. So maybe, for example, on an invoice, you want the date, account number, or amount from that invoice. And we will look at that, extract that automatically. When we're done with that process, we release images, XML, to connexas, Alfresco, SAP, any other type of area. So again, we don't keep that data. We add the value to that data and then pass it on to another solution that can work it and add a lot more value to it. And that's a high-level overview of what the Epehsoft solution does. So we talk about Epehsoft being a much more advanced capture player and much more modern technology. So what exactly is different, and why do we feel that's better? First, we're the first 100% true thin client architecture, which is software as a service and platform as a service ready. So as I mentioned, you can install this on-premise behind your firewall, or you can put it on the Amazon or Microsoft Cloud or any other cloud. It's very flexible. You only install the software on the server. It runs on Apache Tomcat servers. Again, very unique environment, allows you to scale tremendously, makes for upgrades much easier. We bundle all the features within the product. In Capture, you have things like 2D barcode, or maybe you want to extract table line items off of an invoice. All that technology is included with Epehsoft. We don't nickel and dime you to add on additional features. So you get a full feature solution that can apply to invoices or other areas within your company. We don't have any click charges on the system. You buy it by server cores, and whatever you can process, you can process. There are no limits on clicks. In addition to buying the software, just like Alfresco, we have a subscription pricing alternative. You can pay by the year on what you use and either continue it or cancel it. This lets you take monies out of operating budgets and also lowers the entry price point to get into the solution. Because we're an open source based solution, we typically have lower solution price points than many of our competitors, which allow us to address many more applications that you can no longer look for in the past. Because of the platform being open sourced and open and flexible, also with RESTful APIs, it's a very more modern platform than what you may have been used to in the past. And again, open standards. With all this newness, it is very equivalent to many of the capture solutions you may have seen in the past and very comparable in terms of functionality. One thing to mention that may be of interest is web service APIs. What web service APIs allow you to do is really take the capabilities of Epehsoft and put it totally within your application, or capture enable your current application. So for example, within your ECM system or accounting system, you may want to call web service API from Epehsoft to OCR a document and provide the fields to your system of record, or allow the Epehsoft server to classify documents and then send it to your system, or embed it completely within your application. So the value of this is, rather than a two-step process of Epehsoft on the outside, getting images in and providing that information and releasing it to a third-party application, you could, if you wanted to, take the Epehsoft functionality and just make function calls to it and get the data in. So the same platform does this, but this is a really advanced way to really streamline your processes and make it a one-stop shop. So again, a very advanced technology to do that. And again, since we're talking about invoice processing, you could be in your application, make a web service call to Epehsoft, and then pull off your 5 or 6 fields directly within your application, not a secondary process, a single process where you press a button on the screen, the image is OCR'd, the data elements are placed right on your screen. So very, very unique way to add advanced capture functionality to your applications. A lot of companies use us. We have over, I believe, over 80 companies right now using us for invoice processing, some doing over 50,000 pages a day on invoices. Line item detail, header footer, line item detail. We support international languages. and it's very flexible in that mode. So high-level summary is giving you advanced capture in multiple ways how you want to produce it. It runs on Windows and Linux platforms, either on-premise or in the cloud. It is thin client, so that really reduces your costs of deployment, much more compatible with current technology and where things are moving. And if you wanted to host this application, it's a multi-tenant solution that you could host yourself or use on the cloud. The RESTful web service APIs give you a way to really go to the next level and fully integrate this into your line of business application as a one-step process rather than two steps. We don't have click charges, and we bundle everything together. So when you get an Epehsoft platform, you can be rest assured that any type of application you want to address is going to be available on that platform. And again, we're very innovative. That's what we do, and that's where you're going to find significant advances in technology. So real quick summary, the best way for you to learn, if you go on YouTube and type Epehsoft University, there's a lot of knowledge out there. So we have sales demos, if you will. You could see a demo like what I'm doing today or more. But more importantly, if you look at the technical training, you can see exactly how we would set up an invoice or set up classification. And that's important because, you know, I'll show you a demo today, and you may say, well, how is that really done? I think if you look at the demos out there and the technical side of it, you can understand how it's done and really relate to how you can apply it within your application yourself. Now with that, let's go and show you a quick demo. So high level, I'm going to come in here and at the administrator level, show you what we have here. Again, this is thin client, so I'm coming in through a thin client application here. At a high level, you set up batch classes, and it's important to note, since we're a generic type application that can work on invoices or other types of applications, you set up a batch class that defines the rules for whatever you want to process. So even though you may install this initially to process invoices into SAP, you may find that there's other applications within your business that can totally use this functionality. Maybe it's employee applications, maybe it's onboarding applications or insurance claims, any other types of things like that. You can set up different batch classes to handle on the same project or on the same platform. So with that being said, let's show you what a user validation would look like. So high level, this is the user screen. When you process documents through the system will do the best that it can, but there might be 5 or 10% of those documents that it's not sure of. It might need somebody to look at. You know, some documents will go through without anyone touching it, but there's a small percentage that they may need to look at, and that's this review and validation phase. Two main areas are document review, where we review how the document was classified. Did it identify it correctly or not? And then validation is where we validate what data was extracted from the document. So that being said, what I'm going to start with is just one document. This is an invoice that we have. It's a simple invoice. It's color, black and white, doesn't matter. It's a PDF. That's what's ingested into the system. So once that comes into the system, it's processed by the Epehsoft server. Then the operator comes in to review. And this is going to be a batch process. You may have several batches running at the same time, several reviewers doing this process. But what we see here in the review process is a thumbnail on the left, document types in the middle, and the actual image on the right, so you can look at it in a little better detail. So what the system's telling me here is it thinks it's an invoice because it says it's red, it's not sure. I have an option of saying it's an invoice or it's something else, and then I move on. But in this case, it's an invoice. We know it's an invoice, but if you had an application that had maybe 20 or 30 different document types, this is the process you would do to validate the document types. Again, it's an exception process. You wouldn't be looking at more than 5 or 10% of the documents. 80 or 90% of the documents or more are going to go through the system without you touching it. That's the review process for if you have multiple document types. Now, moving away from that, let's look at the validation process of that invoice. Again, I'll take the invoice that we processed, that one image we talked about, and the only difference here is the same screen. We got thumbnails. In the middle, we got data, and on the right, we have the image. So what the system is showing us here is it's actually extracted and read the PO number. If we go up here, we can see the PO number, and it actually read that correctly. And we got a reference order that it read, and a VAT number, and an amount. Now, what the system did is it stopped on this invoice because Everything else here is it read fine and it's no question, but this VAT number, either it's not going to be confident or it misread it. In this case, it says we have a rule that says the first character of the field has to be an alphabet. If we look at this a little more carefully, it looks like an S136. Well, the OCR engine thought it was a 5, but we caught it because we had a rule to check on that. We can have table validations and other rules, but operator would simply come in here, correct it, and then be done, and they can move on. One other interesting thing here is, even though I read this reference order correctly, if for some reason I had to go to another field, I can click on it. We have instant OCR here. So this could be good if it doesn't find the field, or if you just want to do run on a key from image, sort of like a, I didn't define this correctly, but I got these invoices, and I'll just point and click and pull off the data I want. So lots of flexibility and capabilities in this package. One more thing to show you before I'm done with the demo is on the tables. So normally you can actually set us up to read these tables automatically, but you may find in some cases that maybe you got certain tables that are odd, or maybe you just don't want to go through the definition of all the tables. So with that, we have the capability to read these tables manually. So what I can do is do manual extraction. I can actually go in here and define just the first row of the table. I go into my fields that I want to pull off, the description here, and I just rope the area that I want to pull off. Price, let's pull that off. Take the whole thing here. Amount, I'll just take the amount. And then finally, I'll take the item here. So I'm defining the first one. And once I do that, I can say start extraction. And as you see, it pulled off the next row too. Now, this particular demo isn't that exciting, but if I had a very large table, or if I had, let's say, a 3 or 4 page document of this table, that one line definition will set up the definition for me to read all 3 pages. So you can see in that case, if you have table items you want to extract, if you haven't set us up automatically to do that, this manual process is pretty quick to pull off all that data. So that's a quick overview of that. So again, it's an exception process. We read what we can. What we can't read, we pop up, and that speeds up the process. When we're done, we basically release this information, which should be very accurate and very clean, and that goes to connexas. With that, I'll turn it back over to Volker to do his rest of the demo here.
Perfect. So thank you, David, for this introduction now that we know how we captured the information, how we did the image and the according metadata. So let's now move on and go to the process and see where the information has been stored, what happened in the background, and how do we proceed further. So I assume you can see my screen again. You remember we have been here in the overview of our content. I just give you a short introduction, and I want to introduce also another name, Processi. It's a partner of us where we do this SAP part together. Maybe some of you know that connexas, so we have our product connexas, which integrates SAP with Alfresco. You get a few words about this. And Processi is doing the SAPCO, so this is a real SAP approval compliance. And you will see that this tool or this process can not only cover invoices, but also the whole purchasing process or other processes in SAP. So short introduction, what we will see, which process we will see today, because that's interesting. We got the scanning right now. And in the background, something must start now. So we scan, we have the metadata. Now there must be anyhow the document stored and the workflow started. And when we come to our part, so the SAP side, you see SAP ECC 6, so that's the core component. We will most probably, first of all, park the invoice. Today we talk about an invoice with purchase order, and you have seen that we recognized already the purchase order before. And in this way, you typically park the invoice, meaning you key in the invoice to SAP, and of course we do this for you because we said we have a highly automated process. Then you can do another invoice verification, so we will not see today, you see that I have highlighted only a few of these steps that we do not run out of time. So invoice verification, you can double check the entries, but then we have the approval step. So the invoice that has been parked, so that has been captured in SAP, should be approved. And there you will see that the whole system we are talking about today, and you see here also the process that you see, this is highly rule-based, meaning you can configure this process. So when we come on-site to you, we don't say, hey, this is our process and these are the rules that you have to use. No, you will see that you also can change these rules, can change this process. And for example, for the approval, there can be the decision whenever this is more expensive than $10,000, then go this way, or even more, go the other way. So this is something important. So this is not a concrete thing. This can really change. After we have the approval for the invoice, it is posted in SAP, and then you can go on with the payment. Very important, again, for me, see these steps that we are right now based on a purchase order, but of course we can also handle with this scenario invoices without purchase order, and we can also do the whole purchasing for you. So starting right from the when you get purchase requisition, for example, and then finally get the purchase order, goods receipt, and all these steps can be covered. So having seen the process, we have to have at least a few words. How do we integrate now Alfresco with SAP? And there we have connexas, which is the certified product on both sides. So we are certified against SAP and we are certified against Alfresco. And we simply connect the documents or the content living in Alfresco with the business objects in SAP. So we will have, in this case, an incoming invoice in SAP, and logistical invoice that is connected to our scanned image that we have done with Episoft before. And a little bit technically speaking, I have to tell you something about this picture. Sorry for that, for the non-technical people, but on the one hand, I told you that we have a certified interface. So this is this HTTP Content Server 6.20. And this interface, who knows, it's it's rock solid and everything perfect, but it's hard to exchange some information. That's why we also talk to the SAP Java connector and get information that is coming from SAP to Alfresco, or the other way around, so that when we collect information in Alfresco, we can forward this also to SAP with our interface. So I don't want to make too much about the product. You've seen that we are certified, as Episoft also is certified against Alfresco, and we are certified with the SAP NetWeaver. Okay, so this was the rough introduction on the one side. How do we integrate? So when you later on see how can we display documents in SAP and how can we maybe display information from Alfresco that has been captured in SAP before, you have seen this introduction. Now coming to the SAPCO, so this SAP approval compliance. This is mostly about approving and of course processing of SAP processes. And I mentioned this already, we talk a lot about the purchase order, so the whole chain from the beginning with the purchase request approval, purchase order approval, all these approvals that you have to proceed in your SAP system to get the whole process done, up till the invoice that we will see today. Another interesting thing is, as I mentioned before, that this solution is integrated, of course, in the SAP standard processes, so also in the SAP flow. And we have also the chance to maintain these rules, because you might have your special processes where you have special application rules, or special approval rules, and this can be done also in this solution, which is not rock solid, but is really adaptable to your needs. And finally, I want to say about this, but we'll see in the next slide. We have some interfaces the typical interface is the SAP GUI. So this is what the high volume users will use inside SAP. Then we have a web-based tool where you can have access from nearly everywhere. So this can then be for the approvers. And we are even open to go for mobile devices. And you see here, you can see the different tasks you have to perform also on your mobile client. As this is very hard to demo today, the mobile client, we will restrict mostly to SAP GUI and to the web GUI. These are the two options we want to show. This is the information about how do we configure the system. And I told you that this is flexible. I will jump into this a little bit. Not too much, because we cannot configure the whole process today, but you will see that you have many options to do this just by clicking and not to go to other programming in SAP. So before we go to the last slide already, please let me jump direct to the system and give you an introduction what we're doing here. Maybe you remember I should jump back here to our process, which steps I wanted to show. Scanning we have seen. Now let's think about parking an invoice. So what we did not see in the background right now is that the document has been exported from Episoft with the according metadata as a PDF file, and we took the document, stored it to Alfresco, and started a process inside SAP. So what do we have to do first? You will see that the SAP, the SAPCO solution, comes with some predefined transactions. And as I am a person, the parking person, I typically work in the real SAP GUI. So this is a classical thing. This is a task that you typically do in the SAP GUI. And we see here that we have a working list. And some indication here, the SAP symbol means this could be processed perfectly inside SAP GUI, but you also can go to the web GUI. And you have all these chances already here, like approve, select, and so on. But I want to go to one of these because this might be the one that we created right now. We are close to 7. So this should be the document that we have scanned before in Episoft and where we have started our process. So what happens now? That the document that has been scanned is displayed, and you can imagine typically a user should have maybe perfectly 2 screens, where on the one screen you see that automatically the SAP transaction for parking a document has been raised, and on the other hand I have here my document where I can scroll through and double check if everything is correct. Important, you see that the information that we captured before has been recognized here in SAP, and the reference and the amount, and very important also the purchase order number has been acquired, and information is available directly here in the screen. What else I want to mention here is I show you the process now step by step, but you can imagine that we can also have this document available automated, so that we do not have to do all these steps right now manually, but you can also automate if the information is available. So we can check the document if everything is available. And you see, based on the purchase order number, we found also out that we have here the line items. So information is available here about the invoice and also about the purchase order. That's it. So we just check this information. Once again, we can do this also in the background. We can simulate if everything is correctly done. And we see here all the line items that have been accomplished by the SAP system. And we just go back and have a look and say we save the whole invoice now. The invoice based on this approval step. And now our SAPCO inbox tells us, come on, you have created an invoice, but this invoice has to be approved. I can do a manual scenario now, or I just let SAPCO decide what's going on. So in this case, we simulate. Once again, this could be perfectly done in the background. And SAPCO tells us, here are the next steps that we have to perform. So we need approval and a final posting of the document. So that's it, and we say, yes, we can start this process now. So we start the workflow, and the workflow has been started. And for the person that does the parking of the invoice, the job has been done, and you see also that the workflow now has disappeared of my personal working list of the parking of the document. So I close the document that we have done right now. So if you want to search for such documents, what's happening, you also can have a look here to the search, look for your own person. So you see that's another screen where you easily get an overview of all documents that are available and which are maybe in your process and you have to look for. Now, seeing that we have many documents available here, we can have whatever, one test. I open one of these invoices and it just gives you the feeling that you have the chance on the one hand to see what is this document about. You see what has been done already. You see it's completed, it's waiting for the approval. So this is exactly what we did right now. You have a look to the document and get the most important information always for this document. Now we saw the parking of the document, also that you always can search for documents. It can be done, of course, only by this agent, but you can also think about searching for a deadline, so finding out from your whole company or by your department which are the invoices due to pay. So all the information, that's a perfect cockpit where you can handle all your processes, and this can be nailed down, of course, to users, but also for a department approach. Just have a short look here. We have the invoice parking. Now let's go to the approval of the invoice. And this is typically be done, the approval of the invoice. You can do this inside SAP, but we also can do this on the web. So let's log in now to the web component of SAPCO. We have here some of our, you see this search that we've seen right now, but I go here to the SAP inbox on the client, and I have to log in now as the approver for this process. So I'm not the parking person anymore. Now I have to approve this invoice because this was the next step in our process. So you see we are completely web compliant, so we can have on any device you're interested in this application, and also we have facilities for really mobile devices. Here we have now the personal work list of the approver, and here came in the document that we parked right now. Let's have a look to the document so we can have some more details on it. In SAP, you always have these chances like you can approve, reject, you can enter a comment. So everything is there that you can really give your points to this invoice as an approver. And you see also what has been happened before. That's very important. We are compliant as we do, of course, track all the steps that the document has been taken. Okay, we say this document looks okay, so I simply approve, and therefore the document is done for me. I can go back and check my inbox, and the document will have appeared. Okay, so we have seen, coming back to our process on the slides, Now we saw that we have also the invoice approved, and now the final step can be done so that the invoice has to be finalized on the SAP side. I would go over and also show you now that this document, of course, is available on the Alfresco side. So finally I am in. So I give you a short introduction. I think you know in general the Alfresco repository. So you get first to the dashboard and have many options here for collaboration. But today we are mostly interested here in the repository information. So we do, whenever the content is coming and we connect it to SAP, we can have a special folder structure. Typically we come in here in the connexas folder, and there we have then an area where you have the incoming documents, the SAP documents, and we can also move these SAP documents that are coming in to a special rule template. And this rule template is simply something that when we get documents to Alfresco, we get additional metadata from SAP, and this metadata gives us the option to store documents in a special folder structure. And here you see that we have created a folder structure. This is for the invoices, a special folder area, and this is the business object for incoming invoices, so this bus 2081. And then we have here the invoice numbers that have been created on the SAP side. And you see here, this has 7 minutes before. I'm sorry, it looks like that I'm logged in here in German, but you see this is exactly the invoice number that has been created on the SAP side. And in here, we do have our invoice, and this is exactly what we finally captured with Episoft, which came to Alfresco and which gave us the option to rule the whole process as you have seen before on the Alfresco side. So this is exactly the document. We have here some additional metadata. So you see that the document got some information. This is this archive, the area. And most important, this is, by the way, the object ID. This is really the invoice that has been created right now. What we did, we parked the invoice and we posted the invoice on the SAP side. And here we have the metadata available also on the Alfresco side. What else we can do is we see that the document has been linked to SAP. We can even open here the associated document on the SAP side. So you see that we are not only linked in the SAP side, and we can see documents from SAP that are stored in Alfresco. We also can display SAP objects from the documents that we have created right now. And you see, remember, this is exactly the document that we parked here on the SAP side, and we can directly jump from Alfresco back to SAP. Now, as we have only 10 minutes left, I think we are done with this process overview. So we have seen that we can store documents to Alfresco, that you, of course, have all the informations, or not all, but many informations available also on the Alfresco side that we replicated from SAP, that we can, for example, open the documents, also the objects from Alfresco in SAP, that we can create folder structures. Even in the folder structures, typically you see on the Alfresco side that the documents are linked to SAP. We have a special icon. When we have this information, you know that this document has finally been linked and posting of the invoice. Therefore, I have to log in as the person that posts invoices. So we start again with the inbox of SAPCO. So we check, do we have some tasks to perform? And currently, for the person that posts, we only have one task. So let's have a closer look to this task. I click on this, and we get an overview of our invoice. So we get all the information that has been gathered up to now. So we see which purchasing document is attached. Of course, we get our document that is stored to Alfresco. All information, even when you go down here on the screen, you would see also here the history. And in the background, maybe you could have seen this, also the document has been opened directly in the transaction where you post the document finally. So this is for overview, what you can do with the workflow steps, but in the background, this also opened here for the final posting. And this step could also be done, by the way, automatically. Here in our demo, we just want to show that we can do things, we can simulate the whole thing, but at the end, all information is available, was forwarded through the workflow and through the information that we gathered before. So in a real life, the user would have maybe two screens, one screen here for this posting and the other one here for the overview of the inbox. But here to finalize our process, we just have now to go to post the document. And in SAP, the document, we have some problems with the due date, but we say, okay, we can continue. And after the document has been stored, of course, the attachments will be also available. And when I refresh now here my personal work list, you see the item has disappeared and we are done with our process. When you remember, we started beginning with scanning the parking, then we did approve, and now we finally posted the invoice. So you see here, you can also have the information from our website. We have the contact details of Dusan and myself. Of course, we can explain this hopefully later on. And now, if there are any questions, we have 8 minutes left. Feel free to have some questions, and you would be also possible to give you the presentation, of course, that we have. We will also have this webinar recorded, so we will send out the link later on and give you all the information around this solution.